symphony that he's actually spent 11 years working on, called
opened earlier today when we had executive session, and I will ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So welcome to our first televised meeting of 2014. Happy New Year to everyone. Obviously the big news of the year so far was the special town meeting vote for the new school, and then of course the ballot vote of the new school by an overwhelming majority. I want to thank everybody who participated in both of those processes. It is the very participation in those processes that make all this work. On a personal note, I think there's myself and 1,400 plus other people who are very happy that it passed. I think it makes financial sense for the town. I think it makes educational sense for the town. And I think it sets us up for a good, solid future going forward, where we're putting money into buildings that have a long lifespan and that really meet the criteria of today's educational environments and educational spaces. And we can offline ones that do not fit that bill for all the reasons that were discussed during the process. I want to applaud the school building committee who put in, hours and hours of work. The school committee, the superintendent and the school administration, the town manager, and all the people who volunteered along the way in all of those venues and in all those parts of the process that got us this far. Obviously now the next process takes on a new phase, and there'll be a lot more people involved then. And I look forward to really look forward to the opening of the new school and really see what, really the good news that was realized over the past couple of weeks. Any public comment from the board? Mrs. Bertram.
I want to just touch on an email that I received recently, and I believe all the other members of the board received. And it was from Steve Powell relative to the possibility of organizing a game in the spring. As everyone knows, after the incident occurred, the alleged hate crime that occurred, this community mobilized and came together. We showed that we are a community, that we are, and we united as one. A vigil was done, and the community really mobilized. And I think that the community can mobilize again, and I hope and I encourage the school committee and this community to try to put together something in the spring. I think it would go a long way to healing the team as well as healing the healing process for this community. And I just want to say publicly, I hope that can occur. I think there's a lot of interest from the parents. I think there's a lot of interest from the community. And I personally hope that happens. And if there's anything that I can do to help that happen, I would be happy to do so.
Just wanted to say I actually talked to Steve the day after he sent that email, or the day he sent it. And I had some conversations with the superintendent the next night or the same night. And she was going to explore that, explore it with the school committee, see what they can do. Because not only do we want to recognize the fact that the students, not only on the football team, but all in the community, had a black mark put on them. And people that didn't understand the case, know the case, kind of held it against them, and the kids got a bunch of flack, which wasn't right. I understand the reasoning behind canceling the games, et cetera, and I fully support and believe that it was done as a concern for public safety. But I also think we all need to acknowledge that just as we came together to say, racism's not what we're about in this town, we still want to come together and support the kids. And if we can put a game together, not only does it recognize, gives them one last chance to play, but it's also, as Steve mentioned, it's one last chance to play a game on that field, because of course we're going to be losing that field as we develop a new school. So I very much too would support an effort to put a game on. If we can find a team that's willing to play and work out a system so the kids can practice, get back into football shape, and and have one last go, and we can support them at that.
We have one announcement. The Boys and Girls Club are having their annual Are You Smarter Than a Sixth Grader game show. That is scheduled for Friday, March 7th, 2014. It will be held at the Lunenburg High School Auditorium. They are looking for, they're looking for several things. They're looking for teams to participate. If you are interested in having fun, it was a real blast last year doing this. And if you want to participate with a team of four, up to four, it's either 3 or 4 on your team. That would be excellent. If we're looking for sponsors, there are question sponsors, sponsoring questions at $10 a question. Or you can sponsor a 6th grader who will participate in there at $50 a student. If you're in town and you're a commercial entity and you want to sponsor it at higher levels, I would encourage people to speak with Michelle Belisa, the director of the Boys and Girls Club, and that's all available. Again, this is all fundraising for their annual budget. And last year we had, I think, 6 or 7 teams. I can't remember exactly. It was a lot of fun, and we hope to see a lot of people out there this time. We're hoping to get people from town, different organizations, maybe some town hall teams or town department teams. That would be fun, but all teams from the community. We're really looking forward to it. It really works best with a lot of community involvement. So again, that's March 7th, Friday, March 7th of this year. Any public comment from the public? Seeing none. All the agenda items about the public hearing. The public hearings are slated for 7:30, and current business number 1 is at least tangentially related, so we're going to hold off on that till 7:30 as well. So number 2 is let's review and approve an automatic amusement device and a weekday entertainment license for Primetime Pub at 5 Summer Street, Unit 10.
These are requests by Primetime Pub, who the owner representative was in a couple of meetings ago, and you met him through his request for an alcoholic beverage license. He has subsequently asked for automatic amusement device licenses for 5 machines and also for a weekday entertainment license. Since he was just here recently, we didn't ask him to come back in for these. These are fairly routine, and everything is everything is in order. The application is complete. The fee for the licenses are paid upon issuance of the license.
Open for discussion.
It all looks pretty straightforward and pretty basic to the operation over there. So I would support it.
You want to make a comment or make a motion?
I would make a motion to approve the automatic amusement device and weekday entertainment licenses for Primetime Pub, 5 Summer Street, Unit 10.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Anyone today? 19? Okay, open warrant for the annual town meeting and review the schedule for annual town meeting.
And I apologize, but we do not have the schedule put together yet. I did want to talk to you about the potential to have a special meeting next Tuesday, since we didn't end up having one last week. We could have the schedule ready for that meeting if you choose to have a meeting that night. Some other potential items are, we have a handful of applicants or talent bank forms for people who need to be interviewed for different positions that we could have come in. There was a request to have further discussion about PAC and the budget submittal and the form that would take, and discussing potential changes to the PAC bylaw, which the board may want to even discuss outside of a meeting with PAC. But as you're aware, we're going to shortly be in a position where we don't have a quorum for PAC again. So that is an issue. We also need to talk about moving forward with negotiating a new cable license franchise, and that may be something that you may want PAC to do that, or you typically would have a separate committee look at that may have members of this board, may have some members of PAC, but may have other people. So those are some potential items if you were interested in meeting next week. Nothing that couldn't wait another week, but we did miss a meeting this month.
Does anybody feel about a meeting next week?
There's nothing urgent.
There's nothing urgent. We certainly, I think the most pressing is opening the warrant for the annual town meeting, but we have plenty of time.
I mean, we could open the warrant without a schedule, right, tonight. I mean, I'm open to meeting. It just doesn't seem like we really need to.
I tend to agree with you, by the way.
I would agree.
No, that's,
I would tend to agree as well. And I believe that this room and the TV is also booked by the sewer commission, if I'm not mistaken.
yes,
Okay, so we'll just
okay.
have it in our first meeting in February.
So as Mr. Matthews mentioned, you certainly can open the warrant for the annual town meeting tonight. We typically go through the calendar when we do that, and I don't have that available. So it doesn't need to be open tonight, and I guess I'd feel more comfortable if you knew what the
I'd rather it
calendar
goes with the
was.
schedule, yeah.
Okay.
I would rather do that.
Okay.
But I will take the opportunity, because I didn't announce it, even though it was on the agenda, you mentioned the upcoming lack of quorum for PAC. So again, we have openings for the Personnel Committee and the PAC, the Public Access Cable Committee, that we are looking to fill. So if one of your New Year's resolutions was to get more involved, this is it. This is the opportunity. I will stop at no device to try to get people to, I have to say that I am actually surprised that it's difficult to find people who want to serve on this particular committee, because it's working with a lot of interesting equipment. It's dealing with putting together shows and programming that people would see. The majority of people, I think, in town get their television programming on cable, so it affects them. And to be part of that and be a guide, one of the guiding hands that determine how things get done and who does them and what kind of programming and all those things, I think would be, I would have thought would have been more interesting a topic than it seems to be. So, but we are looking for people still to serve on that committee.
Were any of those interviews with potential PAC candidates?
There is one, but you'll have two openings shortly.
But has that person been in front of the PAC yet? Because part of the bylaw currently is they're supposed to recommend.
The next PAC meeting is February 3rd,
Right.
so I'm assuming that'll be on the agenda then.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's been forwarded to the PAC committee.
Well, maybe they are not, are they aware of it, that there's somebody there?
I think
If not, as the liaison to them, you may want to let them know.
I
that-
believe Carrie sent, or Linda.
I'm sure Linda did.
Linda sent
Anytime.
it to the PAC committee, because I was CC'd on that. So
Okay,
the PAC
good.
committee has been notified.
Yep. So then we'll put it on our first meeting too, to interview that person.
Okay.
Assuming they recommend back.
Right. Well, we'll interview them regardless.
Right.
Okay, number 4, minutes. And warrants. Accounts payable warrant in the amount of $544,404.78. And action file issues. Any action file issues?
Mr. Chairman, just sort of to put it back on the agenda, the status of the gas station in the center of town, and also now that we've gone past the school project and the other community issues, just get an update on the status of the bylaw codification.
Any other action file issues?
Actually, have we heard anything additional regarding the old primary school? Is that on an upcoming agenda?
I have
So
an
tonight's-
update on it.
Okay, okay,
Not much of one.
okay.
You'll have to wait.
Okay, committee reports. Board of Health.
Board of Health met, normal review of several items. The question they had, Carrie, regarding when we go through licenses, if somebody hasn't paid their taxes, is that our rules and regulation, or is that the town bylaw? Because they issue a food service permit before we issue the common victualler permit, and they were wondering whether they had the authority to not issue that permit. I mean, it'll get caught, assuming that they come and apply for the common victualler, but
It's a local acceptance statute, so it's state law that we can withhold licenses and permits for failure to pay taxes or fees.
so that would cover their permit process as well, so they need to get in
Yes.
touch with the treasurer.
With the treasurer.
Tax collector. Okay. That was the only question that they had. Nothing unusual.
Okay. Building Reuse Committee.
Yeah, the Building Reuse Committee is awaiting any future charter as a result of the vote. I'd like to recommend we put it on our agenda to discuss. I'm not sure that the appropriate tact would be to continue with the exact same committee, but I think the work needs to continue. We may want to discuss reformulating that group or forming other groups or
Okay,
whatever.
let's put it on the future agenda in February. Capital Planning Committee.
The capital planning has presented its final priorities to the town manager and believes that their task is done at this point until the budgeting cycle begins.
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Bertram.
could we just get, I had asked at one of our previous meetings if we could get that prioritization list sent out, and I haven't received it.
You certainly can. What I was going to do, and I think I did it last year, was it was included in the budget recommendation that was issued. And I guess if I didn't get to it before the budget recommendation came out, it would come out.
Yeah,
And-
if possible, I would like to see it prior, just because I'm interested to see what all of the requests were, and I haven't been able to attend the finance committee meetings because I have a conflict that night, but if we could get that.
Is that a yes?
It's a yes.
Okay. Finance Committee.
At the last meeting, the Finance Committee reviewed, continues work on their policies and procedures, reviewed, excuse me, with the town manager, the snow and ice deficit, and set the agenda for the 23rd meeting, which is this coming Thursday, to do a deficit spending authorization for that deficit and to schedule for the budget season ahead. So the calendar for the budgeting season will be put together at Thursday night's meeting or begun at Thursday night's meeting.
Okay. Library Board of Trustees.
Excuse me, the library Board of Trustees met last Thursday. They adopted their budget and we'll be requesting the required amount to meet state requirements and not more. They were able to identify what they needed to do for that. They are looking at technology and looking forward to the broadband access, and it's their understanding that they will be able to terminate service with Comcast for getting access once that's done. And the question that they had was what was going to be the cost to them by the provider through mass broadband. And I said that some of those things, based on your reports, were that those were going to be determined, but we were just wondering if we knew what those costs might be as we go through. They're updating their director's evaluation form and the process on that. And then they'll be releasing a new web page later this month or the beginning of February, which will be very robust and will allow people to access a lot of things onto their the CW Mars system, and the checking things out and being able to find a lot of things in the library. It's a rather exciting web page that will be there, and might be a model for other departments once we get going forward.
MPO.
The MPO met last week, and we've started discussions relative to the next TIP, the 2016-2018 TIP. The Summer Street project, I gave an update on where we are. The 25% design analysis has been submitted and is currently being reviewed by MassDOT. One of the concerns that came up during that meeting relative to Summer Street is that the funds that have been allocated for that project come from a variety of different sources. And, for example, congestion mitigation or highway safety improvement, there's a whole bunch of different buckets of money. And this project, because of the cost of the project, is being funded from a variety of sources. In order to make sure that the project will qualify under all of those standards, MRPC needs a copy of the functional design analysis, which they have not received. So we need to follow up on that. Additionally, there's a whole list of projects that are potential projects that all have numbers, but they haven't been slated or funded within any of the funding years yet. When we went through the list, I didn't see the Chase Road project. Arthur Frost from MassDOT is familiar with, District 3 is familiar with the project, but he had not seen anything on it. So subsequent to that meeting, I did have an opportunity to meet with Jack Rodequins, and we went through it. He did follow up with Trish Domigan from VHP, who had indicated she will forward the functional design analysis so we can qualify that. Chase Road, they did submit, an engineer has submitted a project need form for Chase Road. Apparently some concern's been raised by Mass DOT relative to the intersection at Northfield Road. And there's a second intersection of New West Townsend Road, so there's some concerns about the crash data associated with those two intersections. Jack and I are hoping that that isn't going to trigger an additional review and additional design work, because as you guys will recall, one of the great things about this project was it was going to be considered a book job, meaning it's basically a resurfacing versus a full design, blown design. So we're waiting to see how that's going to proceed. A meeting was scheduled in December, and that was pushed out, and so we're waiting to see that when that's going to be rescheduled for. So I'm trying to make sure that that stays in the queue. But in order to get into this TIP, we need to get it approved by Mass DOT and get a number assigned. So I am following up on that.
Okay. Planning Board.
No report.
PAC.
As I said before, the PAC will be meeting on Monday, February 3rd. One member has announced that she will be resigning at that meeting. Another member's term ends at the end of, well, whenever we appoint our annual appointment, so I don't know, I think that's June 30th, and it will not be seeking reappointment. And then another member's term ends at that point too. So we'll be looking at what we need to do with, quorum questions, regardless of how many people are on it.
Right. School Advisory Committee on Acceptance and Diversity.
This board appointed me to that committee. We held our first meeting at the beginning of this month. On the 9th, we'll be meeting again on the 30th. We did organizing, chair, vice chair, secretary, and did a lot of brainstorming of various things that we're going to be covering. The superintendent of schools is giving us in data that has already been done. The school has done a great deal of work already on this topic, and has ongoing committees within the school, within parents, students, and teachers and administrators. So we'll be doing some parallel information on that. It is an advisory committee. We will not be telling them what to do. We'll be giving them information.
Excellent. School committee,
No report.
school building committee.
We met last week. We updated all the contracts with the OPM, the designer, and the CM at risk. Now that funding's been lined up, the next phase will be actual final design of the building and the overall the land, et cetera. Just to note that there is an opportunity for local vendors who are qualified to be involved. There's two different ways that they get involved through the bid process. Part of it's managed through the state mainly. Part of it's managed by Shawmut, the contractor at risk. So any local vendors that have an interest in this should stay tuned, pay attention, and keep in touch with Shawmut to see when they're going to start pre-qualifying, because they do need to be pre-qualified to take part in the bid process. So just want to make sure people are aware of that.
Excellent. Sewer commission.
Sewer Commission met on the 14th, went over several different items of interest. Is a request to extend the sewer district beyond what was mapped out through the comprehensive wastewater treatment plan, and they have asked for the applicant. This is on Northfield Road near Oak Ave. And they've asked the applicant to come in with documentation of why that would need to be extended when the town specifically did not include that property because it was not an area of need at that point. That person will be coming back in. They've scheduled a separate meeting to go over their budget. They are looking at the flow meter reading remotely and how we actually now are going to be charged by the amount of sewage going into Fitchburg and Leominster as opposed to the water that goes into the various houses, and how they maintain the quality of the meter readings. It'll be something that's important to do that so we don't get overcharged. Grease trap process. The schools have done all their cleaning and done all their reporting. That they were sort of the test case of how we actually were able to get the information. There are some people, a couple of properties that are still not in compliance with the reporting requirements, and they're following up on that.
Excellent. Mass broadband, the initial project is coming to an end. Almost the whole project is lit at this point. Whatever is not will be lit by the end of this month, as per the last conference call I had last week. The first thing that will be connected will be the community anchor institutions, which are all the public buildings, which have lines directly to the buildings they should be supplied with all equipment. And then it's just a matter of working with the service providers that the Mass Broadband has handed off the running of it to Axia. That's the name of the company that is actually running the fiber network. And there are people that are service providers that they are working with to provide all the community anchor institutions connectivity. That will come at a cost, to answer your question that the library has. I have handed this off and all the information I have to the IT director here in town, Steve Malandrinos. And he is in receipt of that. He has acknowledged that, so he'll be working with them. In the meanwhile, the next phase of the project is waiting funding. It's called the last mile. I've talked about it several times here, which is how do we get the backbone that's here, how do we get third-party providers involved to getting businesses and residences connected if they so desire, and who does that last build-out from the backbone that goes through the community to the actual homes or businesses. So that is waiting funding at the State House. I think it passed the House and it's in the Senate, and the governor proposed it, so I don't think there's any threat that he won't sign it. So that is where we are with that project. Come back to yours?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 7:30. We have, we have two consecutive hearings, but we also have the resolution of the first one that we want to discuss before we go into the public hearings. And, yes, please.
But could I ask one of the officers to see if Mr. Herrick is downstairs waiting for this, please? So back in September, you conducted a hearing to review the issue with the lack of manager at Mickey Shea's. You concluded that there was a violation, and you imposed a 2-day suspension of that license for that infraction. Mr. Herrick, as the owner and manager of the business, the license holder, had the ability to appeal your decision to the ABCC, which he did. He did file a timely appeal. And on the advice of counsel, the board chose to stay that 2-day suspension pending the outcome of the appeal. The appeal was scheduled before the ABCC on Wednesday, January 15th. Shortly, the town prepared for the appeal. We had to file a joint pre-hearing memorandum, so the town did put quite an effort in putting this together in preparation for the hearing. Shortly before the hearing, Mr. Herrick, actually on January 10th, decided that he did not want to go forward with the hearing, and on January 13th, the day before the hearing, we heard from the ABCC advising us that the hearing was going to be canceled. So now you are left with the matter of deciding when to impose that 2-day suspension. So we have that matter first before we take up the other two hearings. And Mr. Herrick is not in the
Okay.
He's not in the building.
So, do we have on record what the days, not the dates necessarily, but the days of the week that we had originally issued the suspension for?
Well, if somebody can, I can tell you the days, and if somebody could look up the.
You can tell the dates? Is that what you're saying?
Wednesday and Thursday? Was that the-
I've got the calendar.
And we know the September 17th was a Tuesday, so we'll go from there.
Friday and Saturday,
Yes.
October 18th, sorry,
Okay. So, Friday and Saturday, I will entertain how the board, or open discussion for the board to determine when this 2-day suspension will be served now that the appeal is withdrawn.
Is there a timetable by which we need to give notice? I mean, good, I don't know if,
Is there a lead time?
right, you know,
Right.
as opposed to saying this
say the
Friday and
dates?
Saturday.
yeah, I don't know if you want to ask town council if there's a recommendation on that. I believe we essentially gave about three or 4 week notice of that. I think.
Members of the board, my name is Brian Riley here for Copeland and Page. This is really, the statutes don't really deal with this. You know, they talk about giving notice for the hearing and time for appeal. I mean, I think it would be the best practice to put whatever the dates are in writing and get that to him, so not necessarily happening the next day. But I would think I would recommend at least a week, but other than that, I think it's to the board's discretion.
Suggest February 14th and 15th. It's 3 weeks, you can prepare for it.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
That is a Friday and Saturday?
It is.
Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor as those being the dates, Friday, February 14th and Saturday, February 15th of 2014. Please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? None. Okay, with that matter being resolved, we now go to the first matter of the evening. Do you have the statement I have to read here? This what we want to read? Okay, so the board will conduct a hearing at 7:30 PM on January 21st, 2014, regarding the alcoholic beverage license number 0636000039 issued for B&H Corporation, 324 Electric Avenue. This is an incident report filed by the Lunenburg Police Department regarding alleged violation of Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 69, the sale or delivery of alcohol to intoxicated person, and also 204 CMR, Section 2.1, subsection 2, permitting any disorder, disturbance, or illegality of any kind in or on the licensed premises. Section 1.04, subsection A of license regulations of the Lunenburg Licensing Commission, operating allowing drinks to be consumed after the mandatory closing hour, and Section 1.1, subsection D of the regulations, Lunenburg Licensing Commission regulations, consumption of alcoholic beverages on licensed premises by manager or employee. The date of the alleged incident is November 1st, 2013.
Just for the record, I'd like to advise the board that notice of the hearing was sent both via certified mail and regular first-class mail, and we do have the return receipt on the certified mail.
Okay, so first, all persons that will give testimony before this board should stand and identify themselves so the board secretary can record the names of the witnesses. So if you could both come forward here and identify yourself for the record.
Sergeant Jack Ebert. Spelling of my last name is Hebert.
Officer Jonathan Brock, last name Broc.
Okay. And, stay there, please, because we have to be sworn in. So I'd ask you raise your right hand and do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. So the format of this hearing, just to outline it, will be that the town will present its case, the license holder will present its case, the board will have ability to ask questions, the town will make closing statements if necessary, the license holder will make closing statement if necessary, the board will ask any additional questions if necessary, then the chair will close the hearing, the board will deliberate and determine, number one, if a violation occurred, and if so, number two, will determine the penalty. So, I would call upon the two officers who made the report. Do you have anything that you would like to add, Mr. Riley?
Very briefly.
Sure.
There's just one officer report for each of the hearings, so it'll be Sergeant Hebert for this one.
Oh, okay, so for this, okay, there's two hearings, okay, so
Right.
you're the, okay,
Right.
so that, the record should show that the Officer Hebert is going to be the witness, Sergeant, I'm sorry, is the witness for this first hearing, the 7:30, and then the next hearing will be Officer Brock, so,
Right.
thank you.
This is the violation stemming from Thursday night into Friday, November 1st, at approximately 0 to 11 in the morning. And again,
I'm going to ask you to slow and loud, so.
And,
And do we have the report here?
It's in your.
Is it in, okay, okay.
basically, we get a call to Mickey Shays for an intoxicated person leaving the establishment in a gray Chevy car. I was right around the corner. I checked the area. I drove through the parking lot. At that time, it was 2:11 in the morning. There was 8 cars in the parking lot. I did not locate a gray Chevy. I left the parking lot, checked the immediate area. I went back to Mickey Shays at approximately 02:26. There was still 8 vehicles in the parking lot. Mickey Shays, as you're aware, it's a strip mall. You can drive around the back of the building. On both occasions, I drove around the back of the building and came back out to the front. So there's the front windows, the side windows, and the rear door that you could clearly see my cruiser driving around the parking lot. The second time I came around the front of the parking lot, I stopped in front of the large picture window. I could see people inside. At that time, I got out of the cruiser and went to the front door. The front door was opened by a male party that I did not identify. As soon as he opened the door, I straddled the threshold and was approached by Mr. Herrick's daughter, Lindsay. She told me that she just got there to pick up her father. And again, this is 2:26. She just got there to pick up her father. I told her it was past closing time and everybody had to leave. At this time, there was 11 people in the bar. There was 3 drinks on the bar. I recognized 4 people being Lindsay, Mr. Herrick, the bartender Julia, and another person, Eric Hickman, who I believe is just washes dishes and cleans up the place. Everybody else was not an employee. I advised Lindsay that everybody had to leave. It was past closing. She went and talked to her father. I could hear her have to explain what time it was, why I was actually there, and that it was time to go to him. Upon seeing him get off of the bar stool, I observed him to be extremely unsteady on his feet. I could hear that his speech was slurred. However, I did not get any closer than approximately 15, 20 feet from him, and I did not speak to him. He then left through the rear door with everybody else except for one other male that I observed to be extremely intoxicated, so much that I asked Julia, the bartender, if this gentleman was driving, because he was the only one not leaving the establishment. She told me that he was not, and that she was in fact giving him a ride home because he was so intoxicated. And that was pretty much it. After that, everybody left, and the place was closed.
You visited once, right? Just that once?
I went inside that one time, yes.
Was the door locked?
Yes, it was.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Please.
ask him a few questions?
Just state again for the record your
Yes, my name is Brian Riley. I'm with Copeland and Page, Town Council.
thank you.
Thank you. Just want to clarify for the record that the closing hour for this establishment is 2 a.m.?
It's 2 a.m., yes.
So when you went inside, it was 26 minutes
Yes.
after that?
Yes, it was, 2:26.
And you observed both employees and other persons? at the
Yes, I
time?
did.
Okay. And is it, when you're on that shift, is it standard procedure to go by all the liquor license holders and see if they're closed up?
We try to hit as many as we can. I believe there's 11 in town that have the possibility of staying open till 2, but we at least try to be in the air and drive through the parking lots around 2-ish.
Okay. And that's all. I just wanted to clarify those points.
What activities were, well, actually, I want to stick to the format here, so we have our chance to answer, but I am going to just formally, although I don't see the license holder present, I'm going to announce, is a license holder present who would like to present his or her case? I'm seeing.
Wait a minute.
Yes.
Wait a minute. Oh, here he is.
Okay, so let the record show that the license holder is here and also the manager of the establishment is here. We have already heard from the town's case about the incident of this November 1st, 2013. We're at what's the exact time again?
226.
2:26, that there were people in the bar, up to 11 people. We've established it's 26 minutes after closing time, and there were still drinks out, and certainly more than just employees in the bar. So that is the town's case. It is your opportunity here as the license holder to present a case if you so choose. Please.
You want to swear him in?
Yeah, I will when he gets,
Okay, you good.
yes, I will. So before you start, just get to the front, because I'm going to ask you to identify yourself first for the record.
Okay, Robert Herrick, owner of Mickey Shays.
Okay, if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, so now it's your case.
Okay, and just to be clear, the notification I have said that the meeting was at 8 o'clock.
There are two. There was one at 7:30 and one at 8 o'clock, because there are two hearings. One about an incident of November 1st, and one of them is an incident on December 15th. So there are two separate issues,
Okay,
two separate reports.
Okay, I have the two incident reports. I have one paper that says it starts at 8.
There were separate notices sent. There was a letter sent originally on December 23rd, sent both by certified mail and first-class mail, advising that the hearing was to be held on January 14th at 7:30 p.m. That meeting was rescheduled to the 21st. And I have, as I mentioned earlier, the returned receipts from the certified mail.
Okay, so you were notified of both of them. So we're dealing with November 1st right now.
Okay. November 1st was the evening of my Halloween costume party. A night went off essentially without incident. Gave last call at the usual time, maybe a little earlier than 1:30. At that point, the two doormen that I had one out front, one out back. They're generally there. They go out on busy nights just to ensure that there's a orderly exit from the parking lot and no disturbances. Somewhere around 1:45, as patrons were leaving, someone came in. We didn't know him. We didn't know who he was. He hadn't been a patron of ours that night. He came in and was hoping to get last call. He didn't get that. And not only that, we recognized that he probably shouldn't have even been driving. We noted that he had pulled in, and he was driving. So after a little bit of a discussion, we were trying to get him to take a cab. He didn't want any part of that because he needed his car in the morning. So somewhere, probably about 5 or 6 minutes after that, we convinced him to let us drive him home, and we had a person that was going to follow him. When he got outside the building, he jumped in his car and he took off. And the Alex identified in the report is one of my doormen. We had told him that if he left, we were going to call the station. And when he jumped in the car and took off, we did. We called dispatch, who in turn, I guess, called Officer Hebert. And that's when Officer Hebert got there, somewhere around 2:07. At that point, he was met outside by Alex, the doorman, who gave him a description of the car and a description of the person. At that point, Officer Hebert left, and the doorman came back in. Now, this would have been slightly after that, a couple of minutes after that, which would have been about maybe 2:10, something along those lines. At that point, the people in the bar there were 11 people in the bar. I had the two doormen, the two bartenders, two people that entertained that night, Lindsay, who was managing, myself, And then there was one person that we were giving a ride home to. And that was essentially what occurred about, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes or so, 10 or 15 minutes, 12 minutes later. Officer Hebert came back, came to the front door, told the doorman that, I'm getting this secondhand from the doorman, that he wasn't able to locate the person and it was time for everybody to leave. And within 2 or 3 minutes, everybody was gone except for Julie, who was a bartender, who was taking care of the last-minute cleanup, and the gentleman that she was bringing home. Now, in terms of the things on the bar, people sitting at the bar, on a night like that, when you're relatively close to capacity, it's not uncommon for 10 or 15 minutes after you close, and the doormen are the ones who take the bottles and whatever might be left on tables, and they put them on the bar. So I have no doubt that there were probably empty bottles and maybe some plastic cups or things like that. To my knowledge, no one was served after 1 o'clock. Nobody drank after 1 o'clock. I mean, after 2 o'clock. And that was essentially it. That was the night in a nutshell. I think the confusion came in because when Alex called the dispatch, he didn't identify himself as a doorman, our doorman. He just identified himself as Alex. When Officer Hebert came, he spoke to Alex. Alex was the person who called. And that's the reason he met him outside and gave him a description of the car and the person.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to open, at this point, the board is able to ask questions of either of the witnesses, if they so choose. Would anybody like to do that? Anybody have any questions?
So what time was the last call?
1:30 for us.
1:30?
It probably was a few minutes before that because, again, like I say, on most Saturday nights it would be at 1:30, but if I had an event, which I did that night, it would have probably been a little earlier.
And what's your normal procedure for emptying the place out? I mean,
The
you
normal
shut down at
procedure for
2 o'clock, the place is closed, everyone's out the door, or?
well, employees, or, oftentimes on Saturday night if I have entertainment, they usually stop playing a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes before 2, something like that. So it takes them, depending on who's playing, how much equipment to break down, get paid, that sort of thing. So we're generally always out of there by about 20 after to 2:30.
Okay.
I mean, there's functions that you do at the end of the night to prepare for the following day. And that would include cleaning, stocking, wiping things down, securing the building, making sure there's no one in any of the bathrooms or, and cleaning up in the bathrooms because you don't leave that till the next day. So, but the only people in there would be employees that work that night.
Okay. Could I ask Sergeant Hebert?
Before Mr. Herrick goes, I just want, only because he's here, because he asked something about 11, I just want to ask about, can you go over who the 11 were again?
Do I what?
The 11 employees, can you go over who they were again?
11 people.
Oh, there wasn't 11 employees.
Okay,
There were the 2 bartenders, the 2 doormen, the 2 entertainers, and the 3 people that weren't working or employed that night were the 2 people that I had asked to drive this gentleman. One of them was Lindsay's husband, the other was a boyfriend of the bartender. And the only other person that shouldn't have been there was the one that Julie was bringing home. Those are the only 3 people. And in terms of the 2 people that were driving, when Officer Hebert left, we didn't know if he needed information, if he was coming back. They were there just for a very short while and left.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
And that's the 11.
So based, Sergeant, on your observations, were people closing down or were people kind of hanging out?
Nobody was aware that I was there till the door was open. Everybody was still sitting with their backs to the door at the bar. That's all I can tell you.
Okay. So there wasn't people putting away equipment or putting away...
They were all sitting at the bar talking.
Okay. Thank you.
Sergeant Hebert, so when I asked you earlier if that was the only time you've been there, but Mr. Herrick is saying that you were there earlier. What time did you go there the first time?
I drove through the parking lot at 2:11. At that time, I did not speak to anybody.
Okay.
I drove around the back of the building, came back, I didn't see a gray Chevy. I left the lot and drove around the area for about 15 minutes looking for that gray Chevy, and then went back. I did not talk to anybody that first time that I was there.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, did you speak with Alex the second time you arrived?
No, I did not.
You did not. So you did not speak with Alex, the doorman?
No, I did not.
Do you know Alex the doorman?
No, I did not.
Okay.
How confident are you on the time that it was 2:26 when you...
Positive.
Okay. Well, we have, the hearing is about 4 potential violations. So just to review them for the board, the sale or delivery of alcohol to an intoxicated person, number 2, permitting any disorder, disturbance, or illegality of any kind in or on the licensed premises, consumption of, operating and allowing drinks to be consumed after mandatory closing hour, and consumption of alcoholic beverages on licensed premises by manager or employee. So those are the 4 allegations. So I'm going to ask Sergeant Hebert one other question. When you were there, although you saw the glasses, what would you describe that you saw that was on? Were they bottles? Were they glasses? Were they drinks?
I can tell you I remember one draft beer in a clear plastic cup sitting in front of one female, and I don't know exactly what the other 2 were, so I don't want to tell you, I don't want to make anything up, but there was one specific draft beer sitting in front of one female that I could remember.
And did you witness anybody drinking any of those beverages while you were in the doorway looking inside?
No, I did not.
I'm going to leave it open, so as I'm reviewing this myself, so if anybody has questions, please feel free.
Can I clarify one point?
Certainly.
One of the charges had to do with the manager. Lindsay was the manager that night. She was on duty, not drinking.
Were you on duty that night? Were you on duty that night as the license holder?
Was I on duty? I was dressed as Dracula. I was not on duty. I did perform some managerial functions before we closed. I batched out the credit cards and did the keno, but that was it.
So you were working? You were working?
Well, I mean, I did that because I just did it to expedite.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that in our regulations, talking about hours of operation, it says no patrons shall be on the premises before the opening or after the official. Customers must be up and out once the closing hour of the licensed premises are reached. The question that I have is whether anyone other than the employees can be there. So I would question, I don't think that anyone that's with a performer can be there during that time, because they would not be considered an employee.
Well, I just want to point out, if that is how we're interpreting that section of our regulation, I will tell you that there are going to be many, many establishments in the town that are going to be in violation. Because if the establishment is open until 2 a.m. and there are bands, for example, set up, or disc jockeys for set up, they're not going to take down 45 minutes prior to the close of the establishment and leave. Because, you're paying them for a set amount of time. So I will tell you that, what was indicated is that there were 2 entertainers there. There's a lot of time into breaking down equipment, and you don't do that when the establishment is open during a function.
Well, we've heard they weren't breaking down equipment.
Well, I'm just pointing out that the comment was made that if there are entertainers there, they can't be there after closing. To get entertainers out before closing, you're essentially closing the establishment prior to the closing time.
And I guess the question I would have is whether, if it's a customer, is a person who's consuming a drink, and if somebody who's breaking down is consuming a drink, then do they turn into a customer at that point?
Mr. Herrick, your entertainers are allowed to consume alcohol?
I'm sorry, are they what?
Are your entertainers allowed to consume alcohol while they perform?
They do from time to time. Some do, some don't, but
Yeah, I mean, it clearly states that customers, forget about forget about the band and everything. So customers must be up and out once the closing hour of the licensed premises has been reached, and no drink shall be consumed after closing hours. So it seems, at least on that particular point, that is
if I may, when it comes to, the gentleman that came in at 1:45 posed no threat to us, but he did pose a threat to other people, and it's incumbent as a license holder to, I can't physically stop him from leaving, but I should do whatever I can to discourage him. And at the point that I lose control of that is when I'm supposed to call the station. So I couldn't keep him there. If I did, he would have been there after 2 o'clock. It's one of those situations. The gentleman that we were bringing home was there after 2 o'clock, and that was not for him not to drive. So.
okay. The gentleman who left earlier, who you called the station about, at what point did you call this? At what point did you call the station with that person? After they had already gotten in their car and left, or as they were going to their car?
This all happened in a very short time span. So when he went outside with the 2 people that were to drive him, and at that point, and I'm not really sure what happened. I think he may have lit a cigarette or done something, but then just jumped in his car and took off. And that's when Alex, who was the doorman, who was also out there, the 2 gentlemen that were driving and the doorman are the ones that walked out with him. That's when he got on the phone and called dispatch, who in turn called Officer Hebert.
Does the board have any questions further for either of the 2 witnesses? Would you like to make a closing statement, Sergeant Hebert?
I would just like to say again, when the door was opened for me, Lindsay told me that she just got there to pick up her father.
Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sergeant Hebert said that when he spoke to the manager, your daughter, that she had indicated she just got there to come and pick up you.
Well, she had left momentarily to give someone a ride. She was back. She was gone 3 or 4 minutes. But she had been there all night.
Okay.
And we had prearranged that she would be driving me home.
Yeah, could we just hear from Lindsay, Mr. Chairman?
I think I don't know that we can compel her.
Okay, if she would
doesn't wanna
like
be
to
a
make a
witness.
statement?
Yeah, if she would like to, fine. If she does not want to, that's up to her too. If you are going to make a statement, I need you to say your name so that it can be recorded.
Okay. Lindsay Chilla, manager at Mickey Shays.
Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay.
Okay. Like I stated, I was there all night. I was the manager on duty. I had to leave to bring a patron home who had to get home. So I brought them home. I was gone maybe 7 to 8 minutes. And in that time frame that I was gone, that's when the person in the car, the guy in the car, I guess, showed up, and that whole incident occurred. So right when I was getting back to work, this is when I just found out that all that had occurred. So, I mean, like I said, I was the manager on duty. I was there all night. I was gone for maybe about 6-7 minutes. Person lived right off of Whalum Road. I was gone maybe, like I said, 6-7 minutes, and then I was right back. And then that's when I found out all about this. And Officer Hebert was there, and then we spoke outside briefly. I said I just came back to get my dad, get everything situated. I went inside, I saw what was going on. Walked over to my dad, said, all right, Dad, we gotta go, time to go. Julia, my bartenders were cleaning, everybody was getting everything done that they needed to. Stocking, cleaning, there was still a couple things left on the bar. I didn't observe anybody drinking. All my bartenders know that they're not supposed to. So, it's kind of something that I've been trying to instill in them. There's no, after hours, we've been really trying to make sure that we're calling last call when we're supposed to. It, like my father stated, it does take a long time to break down entertainment, get their band equipment, put away, count banks, pay people. It's a process to close the bar at the end of the night, and it's not unusual for us to still be there, bartenders and who's ever on duty that night, to still be there at 2:30. Sometimes 2:45, depending upon how busy it was and how many dishes we have to do and all the stocking and all the cleaning and the vacuuming in the bathrooms. And there's a lot, especially, when there's either one person or two people or three people that are employed that are trying to all get this stuff done. So it is a process to get done. So that's pretty much, all I have to say, unless anybody has any questions.
The question I have is the beer bottle on the bar,
Mm-hmm.
and what is your process for removing?
Typically, what we do is we tend to clean off all the tables first. We take all the stuff off the tables, wipe them down, and we line them all up on the bar. Depending upon how many, behind the bar we have empty cases, and they have to be sorted between clear bottles, green bottles, and brown bottles. Depending upon if some of those cases are full, we have to remove some that are overflowing, set them on top of the bar, stock the 24 that we can, fold that case up, move it. Then we have to bring out full cases from the back, stock up the coolers, then take those bottles, empty bottles, and place them into the empty cases that we have. So it is not untypical for there to be empty bottles or empty cups or things of that nature, depending upon if the trash is full. If the trash is full, we have to take that out before we can throw any empty draft cups or plasticware or anything else we have to do. In front of our dish area, we don't have a dishwasher, we use the hand ones. So it's not untypical for us to have a line of empty drink cups in our dish area and lined up on the bar in front of our double sinks, because that's where we're doing dishes, and then we only have a small area where the clean dishes go, and you have to let them dry for a couple minutes before you can put them away. So doing dishes, depending upon how many you have to do, is a process in itself, because we want to keep the sanitary and everything the way it's supposed to by code. So it does sometimes take a long time. So
Do you remove glasses and bottles from in front of people?
yes, after I call last call, like I said, I usually try to do it 1:30 on a big party like that. I try to typically call a little bit earlier. Our bar clock is set typically anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes ahead of schedule, so that we can ensure that we have everybody out when they're supposed to. I've had incidences at last call where people aren't really listening to me, and I've had to physically walk up and take their drinks out of their hands. So, I truly, really try to make sure that there is no alcohol after 2 o'clock, that everybody's drinks are taken. But sometimes people get up and they walk away from the table, and I just haven't gotten to that table to clean it off yet, or my employees haven't, or my door guys haven't. And when an incident like this occurs where somebody shows up and they're intoxicated, and where now our focus has shifted off of cleaning and doing what we're supposed to do to make sure that this situation is being taken care of. So I think everything was just kind of put on hold until we handled the person that was drunk leaving. And like I said, we wanted to ensure that we didn't get in trouble, we didn't serve them, we wouldn't let them in, you know, and there was a lot of talk about that going on after this incident happened. So, you know, to testify to what Officer Hebert said, of us sitting around, we were going over what had just occurred and what we did, and if we did the right thing, if we did, you know, making sure we did everything that we were supposed to. You know, I thought my door guy was a little nervous. I said, you took the right step, you did the right thing by calling. You know, I just thought we did, you know, I was reassuring them that we did everything that we were supposed to, and, you know, that's, you know, pretty much all we could do. You know, if he left and something happened or Officer Hebert didn't find him, you know, it's our responsibility and we did the right thing, but that was his choice to get in the car and leave. So, you know, it's just trying to reassure my employees that they did the right thing. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody have any other questions? Sergeant Hebert, any final remarks?
No, sir.
Mr. Herrick, any final remarks? Any closing remarks?
Good.
No? Okay. No more questions from the board? So I will declare this first hearing closed. And I will now open it up for board deliberation.
Is it possible to deliberate after the second hearing, since they seem to be related?
It is possible.
Okay. Because just looking at it, it seems like a repetition. So if we have the trend as opposed to an occurrence.
We can do that, but we do have to maintain that each incident is its own incident.
Okay.
So this is not a cumulative effect kind of hearing.
Right.
We don't have to deliberate just yet. We can hear it. I would let town council speak, but I believe we can hear them both.
Yeah, you can do the next hearing now if you want. Just when that one's done, you just want to keep it clear. You'll first want to vote on this one, on November 1st. Did you find there was any violation or not? And if so, do you want to take any action on it? And then again, those same two votes for the second one.
Right.
Okay. Well, I guess maybe we should just deliberate now
I
then,
think we
keep
should
it separate.
Yep.
So we're
That would
very
be my
clear.
preference.
Okay.
So how does anybody feel about the 4 points?
I think that, as the manager stated, that this was at 2:26 in the morning. This was the night of a big event. It was not, you know, as she stated, there's a lot to clean up after an event such as this. There's equipment that has to be broken down. There was an incident that probably had shaken up the staff. They were talking about that when the officer arrived. I do want to say that moving forward, you know, that there were three individuals in the bar that really should not have been there. But I don't believe, I have no basis, but based on what I've heard, I'm not concerned that they were being served alcohol at that point in time. The majority of the individuals that were on the premises were employees or affiliated with the events that occurred that night, such as the entertainers, and I don't believe that a violation occurred.
Anybody else?
I think that's plausible. Challenge to prove otherwise. I'm concerned that the indications were the licensee was perhaps overserved. I'm not sure how someone manages the process, even if they're not a manager on duty, manages a building. If they're overserved, so that's a caution. But ultimately, I think at this point, I would generally agree with Mrs. Bertram just said.
My only concern is the liquor bottles on the counter in front of a patron or an employee, as opposed to in front of the sink. But since We don't have any evidence of actual drinking. I would tend to say that I don't know if we can give a warning or some sort of way of saying that the extenuating circumstances of a patron coming in, and I believe they took the appropriate action of calling the police and trying to get the person not to drive. I think that was the right action to take, and as Mrs. Bertram has stated, that could have interfered with the normal flow. That being said, I think that last call means last call, and as you get closer to the end, that there are no bottles in front of anyone, and really sitting at the bar should be doing the business of closing as opposed to having a drink in front. And I think that was the part that I was most concerned with.
In consideration of what Ms. Bertram said, I agree that there were some extenuating circumstances here, but I do believe that both the having people in the premises that shouldn't have been there and the potential over-serving of the licensee could be considered violations. Now, whether they're violations that deserve a warning or a penalty, I'm certainly open to that discussion.
Of the 4 points, I think that the only one that is possible is section 1.1D of the regulations, which is that non-employees were there after hours. There was no indication. While there was liquor present, I would assume, having never worked in a bar, that there would be liquor present when you are cleaning up at some regard. That's number one. I don't see that there's any indication that the manager or an employee were drinking. In fact, there was no indication or at least no witness testimony that anybody was drinking at the time. Obviously, people had their share of drinking beforehand, but not after the license. I am more than willing to allow for extenuating circumstances for a disruption of somebody who is clearly not able to drive afterward, only given so far that it was about 20 minutes after closing time. And certainly to dispense with a situation like that would probably take at least that. I am not willing to take as a defense that it was a big event. I know that was stated, I think maybe somebody from the board, that it was a big event, so it's going to take a while to clean up. I think the license is the license. I don't care if it's a small event or a big event. You really have the onus to close on time with all the proper people being out or in, depending upon who they are and what their role is. I also think it's a fine line that the owner, the license holder, is saying that he wasn't on duty but did some managerial work, and I think you want a very gray area, so I would recommend that in the future, if you're going to attend one of your own parties, that you not do any managerial or any ownership activities that might be construed as being an employee. I don't know how much, if the account of the incident report indicates that you may have had more than your share and you were tallying up credit card reports. I don't know if that's a great combination. But anyway, I also don't think it's a violation in this case. I think it would be an incredibly picky instance of doing that, of finding a fault. So,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to add, looking at the regulation, it does our regulations 104B does state that after closing hour, basically that owners and employees have 60 minutes after the official closing hour to complete whatever task they need to. And in this case, it was 2:26.
Correct. So, I would entertain a motion from the board concerning the determination of a violation on the incident of November 1st, 2013.
I would move that the board finds that there was not a violation of the incident report related to the incident report filed by the Lunenburg Police Department. There has not been a violation of MGL Chapter 138, Section 69. 204 CMR Section 2012, Section 104A of the License Regulations of the Lunenburg Licensing Commission, and Section 1.10D of the same regulations on November 1st, 2013.
Do we have a second? Well, I certainly, I mean, I
I'll
can,
second it for discussion.
okay. So I sense hesitation with the second, even though I heard everybody say, except for one, that there was a violation. So if somebody can offer an amendment to the motion.
Well, we need to find something. So if you disagree with the motion, please state why you
Right, yeah.
disagree with it. We can't just sit here and not say anything. We have to make a determination. So if you believe that there was a violation of a specific regulation, make an amendment to the motion and cite that.
Two problems I have are the question of whether Mr. Herrick is considered an employee or a manager when the manager is on duty. Because it states that a manager or employee is not allowed to consume alcoholic beverages.
Right.
And if he is operating as a manager, then there's the violation there. I've got a concern about allowing drinks to be consumed. We did not have evidence of it being seen to be consumed, but a drink in front of somebody on the bar is what concerns me.
The indication was the cleanup was done, the work was done, it was just a regroup to discuss the events of the evening, so everyone should have been done at that point. So the indications would have been the bar would have been clean, bar would have been stocked, everyone would have been heading out the door. But there were still drinks on the bar, so there's a contradiction there.
Well,
Yeah, and
the way I heard it, I don't want to be on any particular side. I'm just interested in finding what happened. I think what was being discussed from what I heard in the testimony was that latter incident, what to do with the person who came in at closing time. That was what was being discussed. That was my impression of what was the testimony was. Not that they were discussing how the whole night went in general.
Right, but this indication, what I heard was that the work was done and that was a final regroup, everyone getting together, discussing that incident and how it was handled, and it was handled well and appropriately, which I would agree it was. But that would indicate that all the work was done, which would mean that the bar would be clean.
Well, I want to say that's not the testimony that I heard. The testimony that I heard was that the cleanup was going on, the bartenders were restocking, there was cleanup happening, things got thrown off track a little bit because of this incident, and perhaps when the officer arrived, they were talking about that incident. But there's no testimony that anyone was seen consuming beverages, whether or not that cup and that one beer were left from the night and the bartender hadn't cleaned it up yet. Unfortunately, we don't have the bartender here to say where they were in the cleanup, but I didn't hear that the cleanup had been completed at the time at 2:26.
So the question I have is, what license holders are allowed to sit around the bar afterwards? This is a clarification just generally, because when we look at other hearings that are coming up, of customers are supposed to be out, employees can be there, but the question is somebody sitting around the bar with drinks in front of them. The question I have is that who's supposed to be in the bar, and my assumption is only employees. We can go talk about the entertainers, but if the entertainers are sitting at the bar too, I believe they've turned into customers. And I'm struggling with how we're supposed to give guidance to license holders about what they're supposed to be doing. At last call, they're supposed to start taking the drinks away. At closing time, there should be no drinks out, and there should be no patrons other than employees. And
Please.
If I can just try to address that issue. Between the Chapter 138, which are the liquor licensing laws, and the board's own regulations, what the Section 12, which is on-premises licenses like this, Chapter 138, Section 12, says that a manager can be on the premises basically at any time, but that employees after hours or between closing and opening are only allowed to be on for the purpose of cleaning, making renovations or repairs, or for preparing food or otherwise, closing down that day or preparing for the next day. The board's regulations have added sort of a more specific thing saying that the employees can only be there for 1 hour after closing, but only to do those things. So any employee that's there after 2 o'clock should be doing the job, and when the job's done, leave again.
And it's my understanding that some of the people that were in the room were boyfriends of or some other related parties and not employees.
Right, there was indications of that, yes.
So that's where I see, I think there's indication of drinking, but I can't say that we can prove that there's drinking, but I think there is people other than employees in the establishment after closing. And I think that's where I think the violation is.
I have one question for town council, if I may. Is there any determination in the statute about where or what a license holder qualifies as? They're clearly not the manager because there's a manager of record. Are they allowed to be there as the license holder, or is their being a license holder still prevent them from being there after hours?
What it says is that the licensee or his manager, I would sort of read that as and/or.
Right.
Licensee or his manager shall not be prohibited from being on the licensed premises at any time. So they're not allowed, they're not allowed to be, consuming the alcohol
Right,
after
but they can
closing
be there
hours,
at
but
any
they
time.
can be there at
Okay.
any time, yes. So I think that would apply to,
Right.
sometimes you
Okay.
might have an owner and then they hire a manager, so that's 2 individuals.
So that's what
But either one, I think, could be there at any time.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Toll.
No, just to clarify, I think there was some confusion as to what was heard and what wasn't heard, and where I was coming down on it and why I'm troubled by this a little bit is that Sergeant Evert testified that there was 3 drinks in front of 3 people, but he did not see them consume them. And the manager kind of testified in my hearing that they were cleaning up and they were all by the sink area. And to me, I guess I went with, although we weren't proving anybody was drinking anything because the sergeant didn't testify that, it was not just a pile of bottles being ready to be put in a case. It was 3 drinks in front of 3 specific people. And as far as I'm concerned, there were people in the bar that shouldn't have been in the bar, and there were drinks in front of 3 people. And that's where I came down on, I think there is a violation. Now, because of the extenuating circumstances, I'm fine with perhaps there's not a penalty involved other than a warning, and I think maybe the hearing here is a warning in and of itself. But I do believe there was a violation.
Can we pare it down, possibly? Of the 4 counts here, does anybody, so sale or delivery of alcohol to intoxicated person, does anybody on the board believe that there was a violation of that?
I guess the question becomes a drink in front of a person, is that delivery?
Well, presence, it doesn't say presence, so sale and delivery is more of a, I think it's an active role, it's not a passive role, I would take it as at least.
Well,
Just in general, I would say, when the ABCC is looking at that, if they want to see, sale or delivery, they want someone to say or admit that, yes, there was a sale of this, I accepted a new drink at 2:15 or something like that, not just that it's sitting there.
And we don't have any evidence that that occurred.
Right.
Agreed.
So permitting any disorder, disturbance, or illegality of any kind in or on the licensed premises. Well, this seems to be a catch-all. So,
Bypass that one and go to the next one.
Right.
Come back to it.
operating and allowing drinks to be consumed after mandatory closing hour. Again, I don't know, at least my feeling from the testimony is I don't think they were operating. So it's just allowing drinks to be consumed. Well, there's no testimony that anybody drank any drinks. You know, however close the proximity of the people and the drinks may have been, again, me as one person, I'm certainly not going to find somebody in violation on coincidental or projected event that nobody witnessed.
Okay.
For me.
And neither am I. I mean, when the question was asked of the officer, did you observe them drinking while you were there, the answer was no. I understand the concern about 2 drinks, and I thought it was 2, perhaps it was 3, being on the bar. But whether or not that was during the cleanup or whether or not they were in front of those patrons, but we don't have any evidence that they were being consumed after hours.
Okay.
And then the last one, which is consumption of alcoholic beverages unlicensed by manager or employee, although I think that is part of the regulation being cited here, the section. I think the real section is that there are people who aren't employees that are there after hours. I'm willing to extend contractually that a band member is, at least for the night, potentially an employee. Not that they're not cleaning up the bar, but they're cleaning up their equipment. There are 3 people by the manager and the license holder's own testimony that are there, and really it comes down to me, do I believe that they were there to help the person who came in who was intoxicated? Again, barring any evidence to the negative, I don't see that I can find them. I mean, I certainly don't want that person going out driving. They already had an incident where somebody left the bar and under their discretion shouldn't have been driving, that they called the police on. So I don't know what we would have wanted them to do. Could have at 2 o'clock told the 3 of them to stay outside the bar. I guess that's possible. I just don't see it, especially since it's 2:26. It's 2:20, 2:26 at this time. That's the way I look at it. I mean, I'm looking to, if somebody
I think if we have a regulation that you're not supposed to have people in the bar who aren't employees, they shouldn't be in the bar. So if that means they wait in the car for their friend to come out, fine, that's what they do. They shouldn't be in the bar after 2 o'clock. That's the regulation. It's real simple.
Okay.
Which then goes back to the second section about permitting or allowing any disturbance or illegality of any kind. And so that's where I see the violation, is permitting people that are not employees in the site.
Well, I'm again, this is just my own take on the law. I'm not going to double fine them because the first one is incorporate. If I find them guilty of any of those, then by definition, I find them guilty of the second one. So that
Right,
just
no,
kind
right,
of...
right. It's a question of which one you put in. I'm not saying I
Right.
want to double up, but
Okay.
I'm just saying is
What if you only find
that,
them guilty of the second one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying for me personally, I don't find them. I mean, if obviously there's a difference on the board, and that's fine. I mean, I just want to know what the majority wants to do. Really, we're at that point.
Right, and I personally, the situation that we're talking about is 2 individuals, maybe 3 individuals, one of which appears to have needed a ride home, and then 2 others that I would agree shouldn't have been in the premises after hours. But again, I mean, closing is 2 o'clock, it was 2:26, they were taking another patron home. Technically, I guess you could say, yes, that's a violation. But as to what you find, if this board chooses to find anyone guilty of anything, I would recommend that we find them guilty of our own regulation, which is section 1.10D, because that is what you are all getting stuck on. the wording of Chapter 138, Section 69, 204 CMR Section 2012 seems to me to be very strong, given the circumstances of this case, permitting any disorder, disturbance, or illegality of any kind on the licensed premises. This is a violation, if you deem it to be, of our own local bylaw.
Which section of our bylaw are you talking about, referring to?
Well, what you're talking about, what's in debate, my understanding is Section 1.10D of the regulations.
Right. Which, if we're talking totally technically, I could find that, yes, I could acknowledge that they were in technical violation of that.
And that's what we are as a licensing authority, is to have determination of technical violations, and whether it's 226 or 255, it's still past closing time when you have closing hour, last call at 1:30, and that you have technical violations because you come up with a line that you say, we don't want you to cross. Now, I'm fine with giving a warning. I mean, we should be deliberating the guilt or not, but I'm planning to recommend that we give a warning and not a suspension or anything else like that. But I think that it's important that we send the message saying that 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock, whatever the date of the closing, time of the closing, is the time when people should be out of there, except for the employees that are cleaning up.
Again, if it's a technical violation, I'm no problem. I can find that. I can find that they're in technical violation.
I want to just go back to the violation, because it's actually 104A, I believe, which is the hours of operation shall be restricted to those set by the licensing authority and stated on the face of the license. No patrons shall be on the premises before the official opening hours or after the official closing hours. I think that's the concern that everyone
that was the
has.
one.
So
I
it's
misstated it. It's not
104A.
Right, it's 104, right.
Yep.
I apologize. So I can find, certainly, I can agree that that one is a technical violation. And I'm not even so sure I would go so far. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves as far as, what action should be taken beyond that. But if you want to find in technical violation, yes, I can agree to that. But none of the others.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, will the motion, would you withdraw the amendment?
I will withdraw my
Your motion? Will this
my
person
motion.
second who
I
withdraw?
will withdraw.
Okay, so if somebody would propose a new motion?
I would move that we find there was a violation of 1.04 hours of operation of our license regulations.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Okay, so are we going to do this separately? Because I think we have to make a finding on all of the,
No, I think his violation, and no other.
And no other.
no other.
So we'll just
Okay.
add that to the amendment. So
Okay.
that's the sole violation. All those in favor? Please say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Okay, so now, what was the board want to do, if so, determine a penalty? So,
I would recommend that we issue a warning to the license holder.
Second?
a warning that, just, do we want
Just
to
a
more
warning.
strictly word a warning?
Well, we just noted which violation they were found in, so I would refer back to that, I guess.
Okay.
Then I would say that it would be a written warning, and not just a verbal.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
No. So it's a warning, 3-2. Okay, that was just a warm-up for this one. Okay, at 8 p.m., an alcoholic beverage license hearing for license number 0636000039 for B&H Corporation, 324 Electric Avenue. Incident report filed by Lunenburg Police Department regarding alleged violation of Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 69, sale or delivery of alcohol to intoxicated person. 204 CMR, Section 2.01, subsection 2, permitting any disorder, disturbance, or illegality of any kind in or on the licensed premises. Section 1.04A of License Regulations of the Lunenburg Licensing Commission, operating and allowing drinks to be consumed after mandatory closing hour, and Section 1.10 subsection D of the Regulations, consumption of alcoholic beverages on licensed premises by manager or employee. Date of alleged incident, December 15th, 2013. So basically, it's the same allegations for this incident. And again, any persons who will give testimony would please stand and come to the front here so we can get your names into the record. Officer?
Officer Brock, Lunenburg Police Department.
Robert Herrick, owner of Mickey Shays.
Lindsay Achilla, manager at Mickey Shays.
If you could all raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Thank you. So we will start again. It's the same format. Town's going to present the case. The license holder presents its case. The board asks questions. The town makes closing statements if necessary. License holder makes closing statements if necessary. The board asks any other questions additionally if needed. Then I will close the hearing. We will deliberate to determine if a violation occurred, and then we will, if so, determine a penalty. The floor is yours, Officer Brock.
Evening. On the night of the morning of December 15th, 2013, at approximately 02:45, myself and another officer who was in a cruiser in front of me was responding to a call. As the front officer, Officer Robert Ailes, went past Mickey Shays, he noticed there was an abundance of cars in the parking lot. He radioed back to me that he could handle the call and just to swing in the parking lot. Again, this was at 02:45. I pulled right into the parking lot. I noticed there was 8 cars in the parking lot, 3 of which cars were running. I didn't have it in my report, but there was a night it snowed. It was a substantial amount of snow that night. I went in to the establishment. Right when I walked in, the lights were on. I could see the bar was being cleaned up, but there was approximately 11 people in the bar. I saw Mr. Herrick. I told him that it was well after closing time. He said he knows everybody is leaving now. They were cleaning off their vehicles. At that time, I told him he's got 10 minutes to get everybody out of here. And I left the premises, went down to assist Officer Ailes. On my way down there, he said he was all set. I turned around and went back. It was about 10 minutes. I got back, and there was nobody else left. They had all left the premises. Do note that there was no alcohol beverages on the bar or on the table whatsoever. I didn't see anybody drinking any or any bottles on the table. There was just food looked like party food that was just up on the table, on the counters, the bar counters.
Any questions for Officer Brock?
Did you find out who the parties that were inside?
I did not. When I walked in, I saw Mr. Herrick was behind the bar, and I just went straight to him and said, it's well after closing. He said he knew and everybody was leaving, and he was picking up as I was talking to him, and I had just kind of did a quick observation and left.
Yeah. Thank you.
What were the 11 people doing besides Mr. Herrick?
They were getting their coats on. People were preparing to leave. Again, I was responding to a call, so my concern was more with the call. I just wanted to go in real quick, just to kind of let them know it is common practice for myself. I do go to the bar quite a bit to make sure everything is all right, and that they were leaving. With the snow, I hadn't gotten there that day or that evening, so as we were going to the call, I went in and saw on all the vehicles there to let them know that it was past closing time. People had to leave.
Are you familiar with the people who work there? I
am with Mr. Herrick, Lindsay, Julia, those individuals. I didn't see Lindsay. I believe Julia was off to the side of the bar, and like I said, once I saw the owner, Mr. Herrick, I just went right to him and said, "Look, it's well after closing time. You need to leave," and he was well aware of that and told me yes, he knew, and people were leaving. There were people leaving as I was going in.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Officer Brock? Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Robert Herrick. 15th of December
Yes.
was Well, actually, it was one of our first significant snowstorms. I think we had 10 or 11 inches of snow. We had prearranged an employee birthday party. A lot of food was brought in. I made a lot of food. Because of the inclement weather, we only had, I think, 5 employees with a spouse or a boyfriend or that sort of thing. Again, last call, everybody was done. Nothing was served after probably 1:45, something along those lines. What I did do, and it was my decision, was to let the guys go out, clean off the cars, shovel out the area, start the cars, and allow the defrosters and that sort of thing to work. While that was going on, we were packaging up the food. Because there was so much and so few people, I was making bags and wrapping and having them take it out of there. We could have been out of there a little earlier, but earlier in that evening, I had the gentleman who plows the plaza for Lakeview had stopped in and wanted to assure that I didn't have any cars in the parking lot, because it was 8 to 10 inches at that time, and I think the snowstorm was going to be a few inches more than that. So the guys that were there were the ones that went out, cleaned off the cars, shoveled them out, and started them. And then while that was going on, we broke down the buffet tables and put the chairs and tables, everything back. Everybody was sort of doing whatever we could have probably gotten out of there at 2:20, 2:30, but a lot of snow and a lot of ice on windshields, that sort of thing. So we let the cars warm up a little bit before they left.
Who were the 11 people in the bar this night?
Pretty much the 5 female bartenders that I have with their significant others. I mean, there was nobody there that didn't work there or come with a spouse. There was nobody else. I didn't have a customer walk in.
Okay. But the statute is pretty clear. Well, our licensing regulation is pretty clear that you can only be an employee.
Oh, I understand.
Okay.
I understand. I'm the one who made the decision to let them stay a little longer and let the cars. I mean, the towns was plowing, the Lakeview was plowing, and it just seemed to make sense to let the cars defrost, warm up, be cleaned off.
Did it come into play, did it cross your mind that your closing time is 2 o'clock, and that if you were going to allow such a thing, that they should have started the cars at like 1:45? That it was going to take you longer because of the snow?
Well,
if you have to, for instance, if you have to go to an appointment, you make special allowances
Understood.
because of the road conditions to start earlier on your trip.
I didn't.
Okay.
Could have.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Herrick? Okay.
Can I just make two quick
Absolutely.
points?
Yep.
One, with respect to the, this notice letter, I think we basically used the same one from the first one. There's a couple of potential charges in there that probably don't belong. Based on Officer Brock's report, I think we really are looking at Rule 1.04A again, non-employees on the premises. And just to reiterate, not only your regulation, but also state law says that even employees are only allowed to be there if they are working, if they're performing services there, and this was 45 minutes afterwards.
Thank you. Okay, Officer Brock, do you have any closing remarks at all? Are you all set? Mr. Herrick, do you have any closing remarks? Okay, so then I will declare, do we have any other questions for anybody? Then I will declare this hearing closed and we will enter deliberation. Anybody want to start? Okay, I will start. So this one being completely different than the other one, there are no a snowstorm that you knew it was snowing, to me, is not an extenuating circumstance. As I indicated in my question to Mr. Herrick, I certainly think there was ample time for them to get an ample start so that everybody was out who didn't need to be there, who was actively cleaning up by 2 o'clock. His decision to allow them to stay until closing time exactly, and then still allow everybody to stay there while cars were being brushed off, to me, is a clear violation. There is no other circumstance except he said it was his decision. I agree, it was his decision. So it was his decision to be in direct violation of this particular this particular subsection of our regulations. Anything else?
I would agree. I'd make a motion that, is similar to the last one, that there was a violation of section 1 point, is it 4?
1.04.
1.04, and none of the other charges.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So, determination of penalty.
Seems like a 2-for-1 night. Kind of hard to give someone a warning and then go any further to the next step, so I think it's the same thing. I would disagree, and I think in both instances it was, again, decisions made to have people on premises after, but either way, it's another warning.
Okay, so yeah, I totally disagree.
Yeah,
to me, this is a clear violation. The other one is saying, I'm trying to help somebody, I don't know what to do. It's 20 minutes after, so I'm assuming that generally they don't get out until 20 minutes after anyway. This is 45 minutes after, and it was just, I want people to stay inside while people clean out the cars, and they didn't start cleaning out the cars till after 2 anyway. Certainly seemed that way. To me, this is a clear violation of something that certainly should be,
Not sure the difference between having 3 or 4 people who aren't employees hanging out, waiting to give rides, et cetera, but whatever, it's, the point is moot at this point. I think we can move on.
I would agree with Mr. Matthews. I think it is a case for a warning. I didn't agree in the past case because I think there were extenuating circumstances. In this case, I think it was a violation. I think there were people on the premises after hours. However, there was no alcohol being consumed. We did not find any other violations, and I believe a warning in this case would be appropriate.
Okay, I will entertain a motion, or if nobody has any further discussion about it.
The only other question, just sort of thinking down the line, warnings do constitute an action taken by this board, so that if there's a violation in the future, we can refer back to this as an action that we took, and therefore, if this activity continues, then we could certainly escalate the violation, the penalty at a later point. That's my assumption of how a warning versus a no finding.
If I may, that's just in the statutes don't talk about this, but in your own regulations, it's section 1.14, and it has for first offense, warning to 7-day suspension, so that's a big, it's a big span. Second offense, warning to 21-day suspension. Third offense, warning to revocation. So that really gives you a lot of discretion, but certainly in each case, as you have found a violation and you're choosing to give a warning, which I think is entirely appropriate, but those are on their record now, so to speak.
Thank you.
But for the record, I think I agree with Mr. Evesall. What we're saying here is that a similar offense in the future on the same statute would constitute a third offense.
Well, I would also note that the resolution, and because of the repeal of the appeal, would be, for those people who voted in favor of the warning, this would be the third violation. Not only in 2 years, this would be the third violation in like 6 months or 9 months, something like that. So
My point was the third violation of this statute. Yeah, I agree.
This particular statute.
I agree that it is in fact the third.
Doesn't have to be a
violation.
particular statute. The violations are the violation of any part of the statute. So,
So did you have a different suggestion?
I think it probably should be more punitive than a warning. I mean, you can't, there was no reason. There was no reason except his voluntary act of, I'll let people stay here. Well, that's clearly not allowed. It's not like it's discouraged. It's not allowed. And he made the voluntary decision to let people stay there. And it's a second violation. From my standpoint, I didn't vote for the other one was a technical violation. I didn't vote for any penalty on that one. But this is a second violation. We need people, and I'll harken back to Mr. Ebersol saying, technical violations are violations. We need people to follow the guidelines. That's why we have guidelines. And I'm willing to allow for extenuating circumstances when they exist, which is why I didn't even issue a warning on the last one. But this is 20 minutes later. And for no reason, then I wanted to be nice and let people clean off the car. Well, you know what? Do that a half an hour earlier next time. So, I mean, I don't know that it warrants in a single day. I don't know if we can change closing hours. You know, can part of the violation or the penalty be that they close earlier?
I can address that. What the statute says is that you have to allow any on-premises license to stay open to 11 p.m. Between 11 and 2 a.m. is local discretion. You can reduce someone's operating hours, but it takes sort of a separate hearing with a separate notice saying, you know, we're going to consider this, whether it's in the public interest, to reduce your closing hour from 2 a.m. to whatever.
Not permanently, just for one day even?
Oh, for one day?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just change the closing hours for a day, for part of it, you know, for one of their, instead of having them close, suspending the license for a whole day.
I think I'm sort of hesitating because the Section 12, Chapter 138, Section 12, does specifically say about decreasing hours. I think they're talking more permanently,
Permanence, right.
But the word is that you would need to give someone specific notice that that's what could be on the table if the board found that was in the interest. So I'm not sure.
Okay, so it's unknown.
I'm not. I wouldn't be a big fan of doing that for
Although we
one
would
day.
be able to suspend the license for a day, the question is whether we could suspend the license for hours. That's effectively what
That's
we would be
basically
doing.
what I'm saying.
Right.
But I don't think you can do that.
I see. Well,
I'm not sure
I mean,
I'd be in favor of that anyway. I think, no.
I think, given the circumstance, there was no alcohol. I agree that in this case, there was a violation, and action is warranted. I believe the action should be a warning, and I would make that a motion.
Second.
I will say this before we vote on it. You know, it was September 17th, we were here discussing the change of manager. November 1st was the first offense, after-hours activity. December 15th was the one after, so it's like every 45 days we revisit. So I'm in favor of this, but obviously there's some history here, obviously there's some trends, and obviously we don't want to be back here again.
And I will say before the vote, I was the first to say at the end of the other hearing that you appealed, not the last hearing this evening, but the first one, that I think it was an incredibly generous suspension by this board, and this is yet another generous suspension by this lack of suspension by this board. I'll vote for it because it's the most extreme that they're coming up with, but I personally think it should be. I think we should have closed and suspended it for at least part of the day, if not an entire day. I don't know. I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I will express some frustration that I don't know how many violations one establishment has to have before somebody does something, but that is what they wish. So, with that being said, what? I think there was a
Yeah,
second.
Dave-
Was a
Yeah,
second.
Dave seconded.
Mr. Eversole seconded.
Right.
Just
I second.
Mr. Eversole seconded, I'm sorry. All those in favor of this is yet another warning? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you, everybody, for your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, since the license holder wasn't here when you announced the item 1, I would suggest that you, as far as the new suspended dates.
Yeah, so the suspension days are Friday, February 14th, and Saturday, February 15th of 2014. Those are the two from the previous one, yes. They'll be notified by mail too? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, I would just like to note, we spent a lot of time going through our policies, including the alcohol policies. And I think if there's policies in there that you or other members feel are just technicalities that aren't worth enforcing, maybe we should go back through and eliminate them, because there's really no point in burdening establishments in town with policies if they're just technicalities and not worth enforcing.
Not sure that I understand your point toward me. I think I did find them in violation of that one policy on the second one. I just don't, I think there were extenuating circumstances on the first one.
Right.
So,
It was a technicality. We
And
have
it-
policies, we have bylaws, they're there for a purpose. If they don't need to be there, if they're just technicalities, we should eliminate them.
Mr. Chairman, I think in any case, it would probably be good to have a workshop to go over these. I mean, I'm new to this. This is my, second or third hearing, and I'm learning something new every time we go through it. I don't know if there's a training put on by town council or MMA on enforcing liquor license laws and violations. I think something that would give us a flavor of, here are some fact patterns, what do we think that would happen? Not that we're going to prejudge anybody, but just for us to get, for me at least, to get a better feeling of how we work these rules and regulations.
does Copeland and Page offer such a program?
We offered to come in and give seminars, generally at no charge to the client, on a variety of things. We certainly have talked about liquor licensing before, so that's a possibility. The ABCC does also do some sort of regional things on occasion. I'm not familiar with how it works, in this part of the state, but I think they do that. But we can certainly talk about doing that.
The ABCC's training that I've seen is very infrequent and more for staff and processing the paperwork. That's what
That's
I've seen. I
probably
haven't
right.
seen anything
Yeah.
for conducting hearings.
The other thing that I like the concept of the training would be to give guidance to our police officers so that they know how we're going to vote and that they know what they should be doing or not doing, as well as possibly something for the license holders. It's their responsibility to know the law, but if we can, as part of a process of reaching out to them, of here are the hot buttons for us, of compliance with our rules and regulation, maybe we have a seminar on a time when a lot of them would be able to come. That might be another way to reach out.
Yeah, we'd certainly be willing to help in that.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to go back to the comments about it being a technical violation. I believe that I found that it was a technical violation, but in the first instance, I believe that there were extenuating circumstances. Although I did find that there was a violation, I did not feel it was appropriate to issue a warning in that particular circumstance. But I do believe it is a good regulation. I do believe we need to enforce it, which is why on the second case, where it was a clear violation, and there were no extenuating circumstances, that I voted that a warning was appropriate.
Okay. Town manager reports.
I wanted to provide you with an update on a couple of different items. The first is the solar project and net metering credits. I did send you some information maybe even a couple of weeks ago at this point, but I did want to make a statement at the meeting this evening so that the public is aware of what is going on. Because originally we were going to purchase net metering credits from both projects. When Nugent bought both projects, they came to the board and suggested that they essentially move the municipal project all to Chase Road and that they do a private project on West Street. That worked for us because it didn't matter where we were purchasing from, and it made it easier for them because they're dealing with one public project at one location and one private project at another location. But what happened is that because of the size of the project on Chase Road, that project was able to be classified as a Class 3 project, which, and they're classified based on just solely on the size of the project. But the result is that instead of us working with credits, the Unitil will pay over to the town whatever they're going to determine what the electricity is worth. They're going to pay that over to the town in cash, in a check. The town is then going to pay over to the developer the 85 cents, because we're going to get 85%. We're going to get a 15% discount. So we're going to receive 100% of the value of the electricity. We are going to then turn 85% of that over to the developer, and we are going to retain the 15%. So we're not going to be working with credits. We're going to be working with cash, so that it is the same deal for the town, but we will receive 100% of the excess value. We are not going to be in a position to sell credits. We're not going to have credits to sell. So that's the difference. I notified the town of Townsend today of this development and the fact that we're not going to have credits to sell. So it's easier for us because we're not going to have to allocate credits. We're not going to have to sell credits. We're not going to have to try to collect on credits. And actually, there's a little bit of a higher benefit to the town. It looks like, assuming that that the project is going to produce what it says it's going to produce, and we don't have any reason to believe it won't. We're expecting it to produce about 2.85 kilowatt hours on an annual basis. And assuming that the value of each kilowatt is, we're estimating right now 18.6 cents per kilowatt. Unitil on a monthly basis values that electricity, but assuming it produces what I mentioned and the value is what I mentioned, we're looking at about an $80,000 savings to the town on an annual basis. So that's a little bit better than what we projected, and less paperwork, less headache, because we're not selling any credits. So I did want to make mention of that, because there's some renewed interest in these projects now that Nugent has announced that it has an agreement with a private entity for that West Street project. I've gotten calls from a couple of different newspapers asking about that, and also asking what the status is on our project.
And Madam Town Manager, just for the record, Unitil is the sole determining factor of whether we get credits or they buy out in cash, correct? It's not our determination, it's their determination.
Yes, because of the size of the project, it's now a Class 3 project, and this is the way that they handle Class 3.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, how does Unitil value the electricity, and how do we document that that's being done correctly?
It's metered.
No,
But
the value.
the value of it.
They produce on a monthly basis a report that shows what the value is for each of those items. I would John Londa is our own expert on this, and I would have to talk to him to get some more information on where that information comes from, and how can we be assured that that is the correct information, which
Sure.
I'm happy to do that.
I thought it was calculated by just like your home bill, except with some of the charges, because there's like 5 items on a home bill, and I think like
Right.
transmission charges are still, they're not discounted, so those are still in there. It's all the creation charges, the distribution charges, those things. But I think, John, you're correct. John,
As long as we have somebody who can verify that, it's a little bit like looking at your local aid that comes from the state. You want to make sure that we're getting what we're supposed to get and what the formula is. So I'm just concerned that we don't have, that we have someone like John that would keep an eye on that. That'd be great.
The second item that I wanted to provide an update on is the Eagle Heights project. I have been in touch with the developer of this project to try to get an update on what the holdups are. And so he did mention to me that they continue to work with Mass Development and related entities to try to secure state financing, that they have talked to a couple of banks, and they're struggling to finance this particular project. I did mention to him that this board was very anxious to get a resolution, that we are at the end of the land development agreement, that we have recently approved a school project, and now we'll have another building that is available for reuse. And so he said that he would continue to work on this. He could come in to your February 4th meeting and give you a more specific update on where he is. And between now and then, he's going to see what he can do to firm up financing. I did mention the TCP to him. I had mentioned it to him before, and I didn't think there was any interest. There seems to be some interest in at least looking at the building. I asked that he come up and do that before the February 4th meeting, because that potentially, maybe that's a better project for him. So he will be doing that, and again, February 4th, he'll be prepared to be here to make a more formal presentation.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to comment on the Eagle Heights project. While I think it's a good project and I was wholeheartedly support it should it come to fruition, I'm also very concerned about the length of time. It's been years now that the building has been vacant. I think that we really have to have a drop-dead date on whether or not this project is viable and what our other options are. While I would be certainly willing to listen about the TCP, I am not willing to enter into an agreement that would hold that building vacant, such as we did with the primary school. I don't think that's in the town's best interest. And I think we're at the point where we really don't have any more time to leave either the primary school or the TCP vacant. They need to move forward, and we can't wait, 3 years, 4 years, X amount of years while they're trying to secure funding. While I hope that the project goes forward, I truly think it's time to look for other proposals on both the TCP as well as the primary school, the old primary school. At the February 4th meeting, some time ago, Mr. Jewell and the representative from RCAP came in and talked about concessions the town needed to make this more worthy of funding, and we never had anything definitive from them on what specifically they were looking for, and we never really had that discussion. So I would hope that we'd have that on February 4th as well.
Well, I think the direction, there were some things that he did mention specifically. I know one of the issues was connection fees, both water and sewer connection fees, building permit fees. There were some things, and I did go to the sewer commission and ask them about their fees, and they were willing to waive what they could. but they can't, they weren't interested in waiving a connection fee that has to be turned over to.
There was also, those were two of the things that they mentioned, but there was also, a pilot agreement and what
Yeah.
they were looking for taxes. There were a number of things, and I can't remember, but there was a whole laundry list of things that they were looking for. And yes, the sewer commission fees were one of them, and I think that I had said at the time that was a fee that we paid over, so that there wasn't a lot of leeway there, but if we could go through that list and find out either from the other entities and maybe have a brief summary of what they were looking for and what is doable and what isn't. But I am, as I just said, I really feel that we are at the point where we need to start looking at putting forth additional proposals for that building.
Couldn't agree more. I very much wanted that to happen, and I still hope it does, but, it's been too long. And the TCP, obviously, we're going to have to go for a full RFP for TCP. To many other potential uses as well. So, be interested to hear what he has to say, but cross that bridge when we get to it.
I also agree, for what it's worth.
I wanted to advise you that the town has applied for 2 DLTA grants through MRPC, since we're throwing the letters out there. So the DLTA is the District Local Technical Assistance Grant. These are, it's funding that MRPC receives that they allocate out to communities to do work. So it's not, we don't actually receive the money. They're paid to do work on our behalf. So the planning board has, I think they're working on their second right now, and they put in this third application to further the work that they're doing on the master plan and the center plan. I submitted a second one to them to explore the feasibility of providing regional animal control. There is, and I talked to the staff ahead of time. I've had brief conversations with town managers or administrators in some other towns, and there is some interest in looking at that. So it seemed to make sense to have them do some work to do a feasibility. There is a grant available statewide for regionalization projects. And so if they approve this, and I'm hopeful that they will, I'm hoping they'll produce a report that shows that this is feasible and that we can use that as the basis for this state grant. I believe it's Franklin County that received one of these regionalization grants, a significant amount to build a facility, and some operational costs for regional animal control. So I know the executive director at MRPC was very interested in this, so hopefully that will be approved as well. And then I just have one last item. I wanted to let you know that today I was informed by our representative from MIA, the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Agency. They are the group that provides both our health insurance and our liability insurance, workers' comp, that the town, on Saturday at the MIA annual meeting, the town will be receiving an Excellence in Loss Control Award for our efforts over the last several years in implementing different programs and improvements in the Department of Public Works. So our representative will come out sometime in February to present this award locally. We are one of 9 communities across the state that is receiving this award, and it's it's an honor for the Department of Public Works. It's interesting because a lot of the work that we've been able to do was funded through grants from MIA, and MIA is really a great opportunity. A lot of the training that we provide here, especially over the last several years where the budget's very tight, we don't have a whole lot of training money. We do make use of the training that's provided to us free of cost from MIA, and MIA in turn gives us credit back on our insurance premiums. And I've reported to you before that we've received over the last few years about an average of $10,000 or $11,000 per year in credits, and we've used some of that to fund some other training, specifically for the police department. We've done quite a bit for the police department, things that we don't have the ability to fund within our budget. So it's a very good partnership that we have with Maya, even though we do pay a significant amount in our insurance. There's a lot of benefit that comes back that you wouldn't see with a traditional insurance policy or company. So that is, excuse me, that is it for me.
Okay, no appointments, reappointments. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 4th, 2014. We do have another executive session. So before we do that, is there any public comment from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I did catch the last planning board meeting on the rerun on the cable. At some point, they did talk about possibly meeting with us to improve communication in light of the difference of the votes that we had versus their board. So I think that whatever we can do to increase that communication on that, they'll probably reach out from there, but I'd like to have us reach out to them too as well.
Can we try to get them? Any other public comment? Any public comment from the public? Seeing none.
I'm going to do both of these again.
Okay.
Do we?
Do we?
Why?
Don't we just have this one?
But you want to talk.
That's this one then. Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion that we go into executive session under Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the government's bargaining or litigating position, and the chair so declares. It'll also be for the purpose of Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. That is the discussion of the Lane property.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All is in favor, Mr. Ebersol.
Aye.
Mr. Toll.
Aye.
Mr. Matthews.
Aye.
Mrs. Bertram.
Aye.
And I for myself. Good night, everyone.
That's-
And we'll see you on February 4th.